Good morning. Not acceptable, but until you get woken up, all you jokers in the back, come on up. We're not doing this. Thank you. I'll wait patiently. Possibly. While they're all migrating to the front, how was yesterday? $11 out of 10. You know, it's the energy. I don't know, as I've gotten older, you start to change your tribe. You start to invest in people who invest in you. You start to think about, how do we uplift one another? I mean, I'm only 22, so this is some deep thinking. But the energy, the positivity, the stories that I get to hear, I know I've been pretty busy. All I can say is thank you for leaning in. Thank you for making new relationships. Thank you for being here and being present. I think that's the biggest thing I always look at, is if you went and did an activity, like my level of success is looking at you and saying, were you present? Was it good enough for you to stay? At the beginning of the transaction, you've given me, a resource of yours, which is money, that says, hey, I believe that the value you have is great, but I want to make sure that I deliver it on the back end and make sure that you're present and engaged. So thank you for that. Give yourselves a round of applause. Now, few housekeeping items. How many people created an open space? How many people are thinking about creating an open space? Nice. How many people joined an open space? Fuck yeah. All right. One of the open spaces, we were going to have a battle royale of all things JavaScript. I can do that. I'm down with that. But the pineapple pizza thing that's going on Twitter, this is a family show, okay? We just can't create such hate in the world about pineapple pizza. There's only one answer. It's deep dish. So I had to. Pineapple pizza, come on. We have a bunch of international people here, which I really want to call out, and I don't even see her because she told me my sock game was bad. Bilal, where's Bilal? Is he in here? I thought I saw him in here. So we have somebody from Lebanon, Estonia, England, Israel, Germany. I heard the Philippines. Texas, because apparently it's its own country. I firmly believe that we as a community of nerds, geeks, whatever you want to call yourself, we have this incredible opportunity to interact with folks, I'll say, across the pond, right? Different cultures. We all speak one language. For some of us, that's JavaScript. Maybe that's a lot of languages. But we have this ability to scale. We have this ability to influence the world. We have this ability to change things because we speak this universal thing, which is making computers do what we tell it to do. And I just think that that's special. The whole spirit of open spaces and what's there is what I'm trying to do on that.us. Because I feel like after this, we can still stay connected on the day-to-day. I should be able to connect you with other like-minded people so that you can get on a phone or on a video call and you can get some contextual help. You can get something that's deep and meaningful, not some passive answer that isn't relevant because somebody wanted to level up their hearts and thumbs. So that is something I'm super passionate about. We'll talk more about it a little bit later. But back to investing in people. These keynotes are no mistake. It's important to me. It's important to me that the people who do good, the people who are trying to uplift others, the people who have a story to tell, not the people who have agents and handlers in green rooms, although James is a little high maintenance, if I'm being honest. But those who are involved, right? I went to James, I don't know, we really met about a year ago. I mean, we've kind of been passing paths. In fact, have interacted with his wife probably more than him. When I presented the idea of him keynoting, like a lot of folks, the question was, that sounds wonderful. I don't know, I'm not sure. What would you like me to talk about? That's kind of how it goes. And then I make it super uncomfortable, and I'm like, go back, and I'm like, what are you passionate about? And then we have this existential crisis of like, ooh, well, let me think about it, and I'll get back to you. James's involvement online is true. His reasons for being here are true. I think his journey has been something that I can relate to and many others. But I think it's always great to hear an outside perspective. So with that, I'm going to turn the stage over to James Quick, and let's give him a big round of applause.
Thank you. We live? It's hot. Morning, everyone. Morning, James. I feel like I get to do the cliche, like, how you doing? Yeah, that's not good enough. Do it again. How you doing? Oh, that was terrible. Now I actually have to do it. Really give us a chance. Well, I thought you'd come back on the second round and we would be okay. So there's a lot of feelings I have of being on a stage today, specifically to be at that conference, this conference, which is very difficult to explain to people who aren't aware of what it is. There's an extreme, like there's a range of emotions, all the ones that you could think of, and Clark probably saw some of my notes on here. And the first thing like I want to do is just appreciate the opportunity. I also have the perspective of like opportunities are earned, but I also am really appreciative of the opportunity to be here. And I just want to kind of give a shout out to the conference as a whole. Like you have the sponsors, which this stuff doesn't happen without sponsors. It doesn't happen without organizers. But I think it especially doesn't happen without the type of sponsors and organizers and community that conference has built over the last 10 plus years. And I got to go to my first one in Wisconsin pre-COVID. So this is 2018 or 19. I didn't really know anybody, and I kind of did my thing and really enjoyed it, but I didn't really know many people. And the more of these that I've been to, which this is my third, I've realized how special this community is. Like this community around that conference is just different. And one example of that for me is I'm always the kind of person where when someone on stage prompts for interaction, like you ask a question to the audience, and sometimes no one answers or no one has a response to you, I'm always the person that's going to answer for you to make it less uncomfortable. And so when Clark asked yesterday, and he started prompting for open space ideas, I was just waiting for it to kind of die down, for me to be like, I'll do one, like I can go do one. But how long did we spend, like, with more and more people coming up and offering up to maybe lead a conversation, maybe just ask a question, but to do that in a genuine way with people that are here at the conference? It kept going on for like 15 minutes to the point where I was like, well, I don't really need to do this. There's plenty. I may still do one, but that's the kind of special interactions and community that I think that conference, it's really hard to clarify, has built up over the course of several years. And I want to give a shout out to the dates already being scheduled that you can go ahead and plan and kind of hopefully come back for next year, January 29th through February 1st. And again, for me, there's a range of emotions. I've spoken enough. I always get nervous before I get on stage. I have nerves just like everybody else. The thing that I've learned is I've done it enough to know that I will settle in, I will get comfortable, I will be okay, and I can kind of like practically know that. But I still get nervous. I still get very excited. Just like ask any speaker in the audience. I didn't sleep very well last night. I woke up early to do prep, to go through slides again, to make sure that I was ready for today. So I'm nervous, I'm anxious, excited. I'm very, very humbled. But there's also this other aspect of this, of being on stage in front of everyone here, where I just feel like I have a lot of power. I can do more or less within reason whatever I want to for the next hour, and you kind of have to go along, or I will call people out for not participating. So I'm going to do something that is a pretty common thing. It's a little cliche, but I hope that you'll kind of buy in and do it with me and embrace it. And so I want everyone to stand up. I know it's like, oh, I don't really want to do it. I've been that person every time people ask me to stand up, but just if you will, Michael's got energy, thank you. And find someone. It could be someone you know, it could be someone you don't know. And I just want you to introduce yourself. Even if you know them, go ahead and do these 3 things for me. Find someone, tell them your name, tell them your company, and tell them your job title. People are doing it in the back, go ahead. Talk amongst yourselves. So you know what also comes to mind when I think about the power of making all these people stand up? Has anyone thought about how ridiculous it is at sporting events when they do t-shirts and you get 1 million adults that lose their mind for free t-shirts? Yeah, it's got a logo, yeah. Everybody good with intros? Just one person? Cool. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I think this is, again, a testament to the community and the leaning into, as Clark mentioned, for that conference. Now, it's a very simple exercise, but it actually has a much, much, much deeper implication if you dive into it. So the 3 things I asked you to share are your name, your company, and your job title. Now I want you to take a second personally to yourself, and I want you to really think about what went through your mind and how you felt specifically when you mentioned your company and your job title. You can share, sure. Or just raise your hand. So really, really, really think about what did you feel when you said that? You can shout out a couple words. Anybody have a couple words you want to shout out how you felt? Proud? Bored? Did I hear that? Okay. Anybody else brave enough to share a word? You Fun? Uncertain? I think this is going to be a theme today. To look into yourself in a situation like that, to be honest with yourself about how you feel and intentionally reflect on how you feel when you do something like that, takes a lot of vulnerability. We'll talk about honesty, we'll talk about vulnerability in this talk, but you have to be able to be vulnerable with yourself to do that, and you have to be even more vulnerable to say that out loud like some of you did, and I appreciate that. You have to be very vulnerable to do that, and you have to feel like you're in a safe space to do that out loud. And when I think of vulnerability, I think of a friend of mine who is here today that I got to see speak a couple of years ago at KCDC. She's probably now sweating as she knows I'm going to talk about her. And she gave a talk where she cried in front of the entire audience, and it was one of the best talks that I've seen because of how personal and vulnerable it was to be able to share such a personal journey with a room full of people and feel comfortable enough to be in a space to do that. So that friend is Becca. You've probably seen her. You've probably talked to her. You've probably seen us hanging out. Becca's giving the keynote in the morning. I will mention storytelling in my talk, but I will leave the good details for her to talk about tomorrow. But I've always looked back at that talk and thought about how much courage it takes, how much intentionality it takes to be that vulnerable on stage, and from the perspective of an audience member, how impactful that can be to be vulnerable with the people that are listening to you speak. You don't get that very often. So one, I would come to the keynote tomorrow with Becca. Two, she runs an amazing community called Virtual Coffee, which is like I look up to as a community and things that she's done. And thinking about vulnerability, I'm going to test my vulnerability-ness, my ability to be vulnerable with you. And I'm going to share personal stories of my journey up until this point of standing on the stage. I didn't think I would actually choke up, but I did. And now I have to look to Becca for that strength to get through. In 2015, my dad called me and told me that he had 6 months to live. That just took like a really left turn. Serious moment for me. My dad called me in 2015 and told me he had 6 months to live. At the time, to set the stage for what's going on in my life at this time, I am living out my most grand dream in the world of living and working in New York City. I don't know what it was about the Ninja Turtles that was so cool, but I've never wanted to ride a subway more than anything in my life. I've never wanted to go in the sewers more than anything in my life. I've never wanted to see the smoke and the sounds and the feel and the smells. I've never wanted to do that any more than in New York City. That was my ultimate dream in the entire world. And I started my career out at Microsoft. I was working in South Florida, and I went to my manager at one point and said, hey, I really want to go to New York City. That day, coincidentally, someone had just left the team in New York City. He said, you better be serious if you want to do this. And so 2 weeks later, my wife and I drove our U-Haul from Florida up to New York City. And to give you a little bit more context of I'm at the kind of the top of my career, the top of my personal life, the top of living out my dreams. I'm standing on this roof, and I get that call from my dad. End up moving home to be with my dad, who had 6 months to live, who died a week after I got there. And I actually got that call standing on this roof. This was our rooftop in Brooklyn overlooking Manhattan. One of the most amazing views of Manhattan. It's one of the most special things in the world. And we were out having lunch with friends, got a call, went over to the side, and just slumped down, broke down, and started crying. So in the middle of the kind of climax of my personal life and career, working for one of the top tech companies in the world, in one of the biggest cities, most amazing cities in the entire world that I dreamed of, I find this moment. And there's a lot to reflect on. This is not the journey of how tough that was. This is now becoming a reflection on my father and the difference between job versus career. Because when you lose people that are special to you, you start to look back at their lives. You start to reflect on their impact. You start to think about how they lived their lives or how they didn't. And you spend a lot of time thinking about that. And so I looked back at my parents combined. My parents never made more than, I think, like $45,000 combined. My dad in particular was one of the smartest people I've ever met. My dad went to law school. He graduated with his law degree. He practiced law for I'm not sure how long, and decided he didn't love it. And he decided not to continue to do that. Now, you can make varying amounts of money as a lawyer. You could make like a solid career. You can make millions depending on what you do. He probably would have been like the solid, stable career type path. But he decided he didn't want that because he didn't love being a lawyer, which is admirable. I love that about the decision that he made was he decided to choose to try to do something that he enjoyed while sacrificing the potential stability and income of being a lawyer. There's one major flaw. He decided to focus on happiness instead of money and stability, etc. But unfortunately, he never found that either. Because my job, or my family, my father specifically, my family as a whole, for the most part, when I look out at the jobs that they worked, they had jobs, but they never had careers. They didn't have conversations of making it to the next step. They didn't have conversations of working towards changing the things in their career or their job or their boss or their team or whatever that they didn't enjoy. I was surrounded by people that had jobs, not careers, which is a very, very, very distinct, different thing. So this talk is all about honesty. It's about being honest with yourself. It's about being vulnerable enough with yourself to be honest with yourself and maybe some of the people around you. It's about happiness and how I think that should be the priority in your life and career, my personal opinion. And it's about taking back control over those things. It's about being honest, having recognition, being vulnerable with yourself, looking towards what happiness might be, and then taking control of achieving that happiness for yourself and your career. So my name is James Q. Quick. I have been doing some combination of these three things professionally for about 10 years now, which is really hard to believe. I started my career out of college in 2013 as a technical evangelist at Microsoft, went on to do software engineering and architecture at FedEx, went to Auth0, PlanetScale, and I've done these three things professionally for, during that time, about 10 years. I never thought those would be things that I would do, but here I am, a professional speaker on stage to talk to you about my career and my journey. And this is actually a really cool moment for me because I get to not only look at myself as a speaker now, but I get to embrace the tag of keynote speaker. I get to stand on the stage today now as a keynote speaker, which is an incredible accomplishment for me. I'll talk about this more. The other thing that I'm most proud of, I think, is I mentioned several of the jobs that I've had. I've always had this dream of working for myself and doing content full-time. And as of 6 months ago, I am now a full-time technical content creator working full-time for myself. And there's kind of two thoughts that go through my mind when I share that I think you're probably thinking. And the first one is, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. We hear kids now, this is their dream. They used to want to be basketball players and doctors and lawyers and blah, blah, blah. But if you ask a 13-year-old what they want to be, what's their number one answer now? YouTuber. I want to be Minecraft. Is that how they say that? They want to be a YouTuber. They want to be a TikToker. They want to be a content creator. They want to be all these things, etc. And to a lot of us, that feels ridiculous. But I can tell you now, where we are and where we're going, these are real jobs and these are real opportunities, and I'll talk a little bit more about the impact that can have going forward. Now, the other thought that's probably going through your mind, I'm just kind of making assumptions here, is, okay, he's a full-time content creator. He's also probably a millennial. And you are 100% correct. I was born in 1991, which is the epitome of that range as a millennial. And there's lots of ways that we perceive millennials and judge millennials. Some of those thoughts that you will, stereotypes that we will associate with millennials. Millennials think we should make more money. Millennials think we should work less hours. We should have higher titles. We should be the boss. We should do all of these things. And when millennials do that, they do that in a way that pisses the old generation off because it's not how it was back in their day. You've ever heard someone gets promoted that's younger and then the person that's been there not trying to advance their careers, like, oh, they haven't put the time in, they haven't done the blah, blah, blah. Back in my day, we had to be here for X number of years to make it to this level, etc. Millennials piss people off that are used to doing things in a different way because it's not the way that they did it and what they had to go through. Because millennials want this. They want more money, less hours, more vacation. I want you to pay for all my food. I want all these things as a millennial. That annoys people. But the reality is, as a millennial, this is the most impactful and powerful mentality we can possibly have. There's absolutely no reason you can't envision what your perfect career is and have that be a realistic goal and fight to change to get that to be your career. There's no reason we should continue to have to do things the way we did them before just because people had to do that before and that's what they want other people to do. There's no reason this millennial mentality shouldn't be the way we all look at the world. Because we look at the world, specifically in careers, specifically in jobs, with a wealth of opportunity, with an optimism that hasn't existed in a very long time. And although it may be annoying, it is extremely powerful. So I got a text the other day. I'll get to who this is in a second. This person will recognize the text pretty quickly. I'll kind of give you a second to read this, but it talks about journeys in careers, and it talks about going back to millennials, kind of seeing that end result and thinking that should happen immediately. So I do want to clarify, as I rave about the mentality of a millennial, as I rave about your career should absolutely 100% be everything that you've ever envisioned, that doesn't mean that it happens overnight. I want to be realistic, and I want to address that. That doesn't mean it happens overnight. But there's no reason that shouldn't be the goal. And so I got this text that kind of talks about the careers, and it talks about how many people see the end goal, and they want to jump to that. They want to get there, but that this process, the getting there, is actually the beauty in it. And this is from another friend of mine. I like to call out friends when I can, who happens to be gave a talk yesterday, has another talk today, Taylor? Oh my gosh, I missed my timing. If y'all didn't see Taylor's talks yesterday, then you should go meet him and talk to him and hang out with him. But he has a text, you can share the details later, where he sends a text every day to a group that he has with amazing advice and thoughts. And I thought this was particularly relevant as this came like last week or something, in the last week. And so I wanted to bring it up in the realm of millennial context. And so I want to come back to this reality of, like, although I'm going to tell you everything should be what you envision it is, as Maroon 5 famously once said, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. It doesn't happen overnight. The things that I get to be up here and say and suggest and tell you to do or whatever that is, that's great, but just understand that doesn't change overnight. It's a journey. And I think if you change your mindset a little bit, so the way it's phrased in that message, to appreciate that journey, you'll have a much different mentality on how you go. In addition to that, understanding that things don't happen overnight, I think how you react or how you respond to every situation is a choice. I think when things go bad, you have a decision to make. What does that mean for you and how to respond to it? I think when things go well, you have a responsibility to yourself to figure out how you're going to handle that success and balance that, because we're going to have ups and downs in every stage of our personal life and career. So let's start with, what does stuck look like? In careers, what does stuck look like? And I'll give you an example, a very personal example. My mom passed away my senior year of college, and my dad had to work, hadn't made much money in his career, didn't have a ton of savings, wasn't able to retire, had to work a shitty job to get by. And he was 64 to 68 during this time range. So every day as I graduated college, as I went to work at one of the tech companies in the world, working in one of the biggest major cities in the world, living out my ultimate dreams, my dad is working the shittiest job that he could possibly work every day because he had to, with no optimism in sight. At this point, he hadn't added additional skills. He didn't have things where he could go to other places. And not to mention, this was semi-manual labor, like not like super manually, but he worked in kind of a printing press thing where he stood 8 or 9 hours. I can't stand for 8 or 9 hours. I don't know how your knees feel. I can't stand for 8 or 9 hours at all. And that's the situation that my dad was in, and nothing made me more sad than knowing that for him. And there was really not much I could do about that. We helped out financially. Jess and I had conversations about how to help that out. So we helped out financially, but there's not really much I could do for him to get past that moment of being stuck. So this is where hopefully your wheels are starting to turn. And I would like you to, as we talk about this, reflect on how these things resonate with you Do you feel stuck in your career? Do you not feel stuck? Do you feel optimistic? Do you feel like you're working towards something? Start thinking about those and relate them back to the things that I talk about. And if you really want the answer of like, what does stuck look like? There's a lot of similarity to CrossFitters. Anybody do CrossFit? I love you, so just know that. What's the standard thing you hear about CrossFitters? How do you know if CrossFitters do CrossFit? They will tell you. So similar to CrossFitters, people who are stuck in their career will continue to talk about being stuck in their career. Do you have those people at work? Thank you, JD. One hand. Thank you, audience. Are you that person at work? You might be that person. But people who are stuck in their career talk like they're stuck in their career on a consistent basis. Rats, I don't have the preview for this video. That skipped a couple slides. So, as you think about those people who are stuck in their career, may or may not be you, again, being the type of people where that's the thing that they talk about on a consistent basis, you start to think about empathy. You start to think about, like, how can I show up to help this person potentially? How can I bring some positivity to their mentality and their conversations? How can I show up and be empathetic to their situation? And I mentioned that I grew up in a situation where I was basically surrounded by this. I grew up with people talking about their careers going nowhere. I grew up with people talking about how much money they didn't make. I grew up with people not having career conversations and thinking about what they could do next. I grew up, maybe a little dramatic about this, but I grew up surrounded by this. To the point where, unfortunately, one of my character flaws is I really don't have empathy. I can in certain moments, but specifically in relation to these career conversation type things, like the people who talk negatively consistently, for better or for worse, not something I'm super proud of, I really lack empathy. I lack it. And if you're curious, if you haven't met my wife, Jess, if you're curious who she is, she's the one in the front that's nodding very aggressively to confirm the fact that I lack empathy. I can't tell you how many times my wife has come to me to tell me about what's going on in her job and her career that day, etc. And just like a person that lacks empathy and my mentality, I immediately tell her what she should do. Problem solver. I think there's some benefit to that question mark, Jess. But I think there are also situations, and I take this very personally, to think about sometimes you just have to show up and listen. I don't do it very well, but I try. But this is in the context, specifically around careers, specifically around those people who continue to focus on the negative, and that's what they talk about, and that's what's going to continue to be their reality. And I think there's varying degrees of things we can control. We have a section on taking control in a second. One of the things that you can control, making a decision to go to a company, but after you're at a company, you have less control over what the actual culture is. You can influence things and you can say we should do this thing and make suggestions, etc. But I think it really starts with your work culture. Again, this doesn't take away the fact that if you're not happy with a company, go work in another company, etc. But I think work culture has a significant influence on how we enjoy our jobs and ideally what we consider to be our careers. So in thinking about poor work culture, as any good millennial would do, I went to Twitter. Let's ask Twitter, what are some of the things that you think of are bad signs of a culture? So we're going to play a game called Bad Culture Bingo. We're going to go through some phrases that you'll probably resonate with. It is what it is. My wife is laughing because we kind of talked about that's her acceptance of things. The negative part of this is people look at the way things are and don't look at the way they can change it, so their mentality is like limited to what it is. It is what it is. Someone left so you need to do their job. Anyone been in that position? The expectation of an employer to lose someone and expect to do the same amount of work is utterly ridiculous. That's not your individual responsibility to fix. People aren't burned out. It's people at a company maybe not being vulnerable, maybe not being honest with themselves, with their employees, and figuring out what their feedback is and how they're doing. Working overtime shows you're committed. Anybody been in a situation like that? Like that's your expectation, is you got to do what you got to do, and you got to be here, and that's just it. It is what it is. We've always done it that way. I might lose my job if I say this. We've probably all said that before a few times. Can you change your estimate? I'll talk more about this in a minute. Can you work the weekend? And this is actually the one I thought my wife would get the biggest kick out of. Is she has said this has been her phrase recently, and now I'm telling people this is a bad phrase, so I apologize for that. We'll talk later. A couple of other familiar hits. I'm living the dream. Everybody, like I say that. And it's like, that doesn't mean shit. Like, you're not living the dream if that's what you say. We're a family. There's a whole story about that. And then here's a fun one. We've already committed to the date. This is one of my biggest pet peeves in the entire world. One of my very biggest pet peeves. The people who don't do the work and don't know how the work gets done don't commit dates. That's not how that should work. So I had a situation, an example of a struggle that I've had in a work culture, where we were working on these new features that were like, it was a priority, right? Like we had missed some features in shipping something to production that we didn't know we had because we were replicating an old system. And we needed to have parity match, and we thought we had done due diligence to understand what all those different features are and what we would need to build to be able to launch this new version and have everybody that used the old application get everything they need out of the new application. Turns out we were wrong. Probably some hands have been there. There was like a series of reports and graphs that we just had no idea existed. So we're not working overtime and staying on weekends or anything like that, but we're like, this is the priority. Everything that we had scheduled to work on, now we're doing something else. Now we're doing these features. And so a BA who was kind of doing like business analyst for try to explain acronyms, was doing kind of project management for this to like check in with people like, where are we prioritizing, et cetera. And she asked me like, how long do you think this will take? I said, well, it's Thursday now, probably like next Tuesday. She says, oh, well, you think you could change it to Friday? It's like, no, the hell I can't change it to Friday. She's like, well, it'd be really helpful if like we blah, blah, blah. I was like, that's not how estimates work. That's not how this relationship works. Like I know what I'm doing, and you asked me for an estimate. Here's what it is. That was a big sign for me, specifically in that dynamic of like this isn't the culture that I'm super excited about, specifically in that dynamic. So we talked a lot about honesty. We talked a lot about vulnerability. I'm wondering just how honest and vulnerable we can be with ourselves as a group. This is going to be like a stand-up thing, so just mentally prepare yourself to do the annoying stand-up thing. But I want to play a game that's called You Might Be Stuck If. Do people know Jeff Foxworthy? You might be a redneck if. It's funny. It's fun. I want to play a game of You Might Be Stuck If. So are you brave enough to answer like as a group? Are you brave enough to stand up if your answer is yes? Okay. I want to know how many people stand up if you have taken longer bathroom breaks than you needed to or more bathroom breaks than you needed to get away from your desk and where you were, and maybe you're sitting on the toilet on your phone playing 2048. Not that that's me, but that's me. Someone's got to be brave enough to admit this. I can't tell you how much time I spent. I probably spent 4 hours a day in the bathroom when I didn't want to be at work. Like every time they're like, where is James? Like, he's probably in the bathroom. And I had to pretend that I had some sort of condition to require me to be in there for 4 hours a day so I could get away from the monotony of work. Stay standing if you don't mind, people that, I appreciate all of the interaction. I know it's annoying. I've been in the audience, but it does help. I appreciate that. Here's a simpler one, and if people aren't standing up for this, I think you're lying. Counting the clock. How many people look at the clock, and you're literally counting down to minutes and seconds before it seems reasonable to leave, and while you're gauging what reasonable to leave is, if reasonable to leave is 5 o'clock, then you start questioning like, all right, 5 o'clock is okay, 4:55 is probably okay, and then you go down this rabbit hole of I'm ready to leave at 3. If you're not standing and you just don't want to, fine. If you're not standing because you really think, any job. Oh, yeah. Let's clarify. People sitting next to your managers, this is any job. Managers, judge-free zone. Completely judge-free zone. If you're not standing, you're either doing something else, totally fine. If you're thinking you've really never done this, you're probably lying. Here's one. I've talked about all the amazing things of this conference. How many people are here partially because it's better than going to work? Just a little. Now someone stood up. Thank you. That's a good thing because this is an amazing experience. What could be better than this? So again, if you're not standing, I think you're lying. But like the idea of getting out and away and doing something else than your regular job is an exciting thing. Occasionally. Thank you. You may sit. The power and control I have up here is really, I'm not going to lie, it's getting to my head. Now, I've got a question for people on that last one. How many people's companies paid for you to be here? Good amount of hands. That's great. How many people, if not paid, you didn't have to take your own vacation days to be here? Awesome. How many people got encouraged to come from your employers? Clark, your employer put a lot of pressure on you to come. So it's a very good sign because the point of this is your company should be investing in you. If you want to not feel stuck, be in a company that's pushing you to better yourself in a way that you talk about and agree on, and they support you with resources to do that. That's not always money, because money is finite. There's not always money to do everything, but there are resources and ways to encourage you to continue to be a better you that will come back to impact the company, can come back to impact the company, but is specifically investing in you as an individual and not necessarily for the benefit of the company. This kind of like show of hands, do people feel invested in from their company? It's amazing. That's a very high percentage. Everybody on Clark's team is like, yeah, I kind of sometimes. I think it is a required thing. I think it should absolutely be a focus for companies is to invest in you in various different ways. I also don't think it's done that often very well. I'll talk about another aspect of this coming on in a few minutes. I'm also curious who, as a developer, who is on call? Clark, put your hand down, Clark. So developers on call, 20 or so, maybe, a few hands, maybe like 10, whatever. On call. So on call means if shit hits the fan, it's your responsibility to answer the phone. Now, I don't know your specific jobs and roles and products, but something goes wrong, you're getting a call, right? Which means if your kid's recital, you got to step out and take that call. That means if you're out to dinner with your spouse, your partner, your family, your friends, you got to step out and take that call. That means if you're watching one of the best keynotes you've ever seen in your entire life and you get a call, unfortunately, you have to step out. I don't see as much agreement as I was hoping for. So thank you for that. This is where the mix of my millennialness, I try to bring the millennial back a little bit. I try to harness the millennial to also understand with us all as a group, on call is a thing, stuff just has to keep going. Totally fair. It has to. There has to be people available to fix things. But I'm also curious, when you look at how you handle on call, how many people feel appreciated is fine, but how many people feel compensated? Not necessarily dollars-wise, but do you feel compensated if you get a call during the week? Are you, hands up if you do on call or have, and you felt compensated for that in some way, not just thank you, compensated in some way. A couple of hands. How many people dread on call? Again, the reality is on call has to happen. I'll be realistic with you there. But I'll also be realistic with you now that never again in my life, if it's not my own product, will I ever be on call for a company. It's not to say that, again, it has to happen. I won't take away from that, and I'm not diminishing that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. For me in my career, I will never do that because I don't want to be at dinner with my wife and have to walk away and answer a call. And if you're in that situation where you raise your hands of you dread it, maybe that's something to think about. I actually felt fairly compensated for my on-call rotation because I would be on call for a week. We rarely got calls, but each week we were on call, we would get a comp day. I felt compensated for that. An extra day the following week, I felt compensated for that because you don't sleep. I worked on applications that ran from 10 o'clock at night to 3 o'clock in the morning at FedEx. You know how many packages go through the small package sort system at Memphis Hub and FedEx during peak time? 1 million to 1.5 million. So on at that point, it was thank you. It was 750,000 was average, and then you get into peak and it's 1 million to 1.5. And that sort system ran in the middle of the night, not during the day, conveniently. But I did feel compensated for that because I got a comp day regardless of if I got called. Oh, this is my meme to say, you get a call, you have to get up and go answer it. So sorry for the timing there. So let's kind of switch this a little bit. Let's talk about what does happiness look like. And I've shared some news with a lot of you here individually, so a lot of you already know this, but I think about happiness maybe a little differently now, as my wife and I are expecting our first child in May this coming year. It's the second time I get choked up today. And I'll be honest, I don't like kids. This is not news to Jess. The annoyance of the idea of kids, we're on the same page, I think. We're very excited. We're getting more and more excited. But I have to kind of think about happiness in a different way, because remember I started this talk by reflecting on my thoughts of my father. His job, not career, his happiness, lack thereof, his money, his lack thereof. And now when you kind of think about the next generation of having a kid, now I start to think about this somewhat differently, but also maybe just more. Maybe there's just more reflection that goes on my head and goes on in my head when I think about having kids. We'll start with one and then see how it goes. I don't know. So the other thing I think about is I'm going to talk a lot about my wife, and she hates attention, so please go up and tell her how proud you are of her after the talk. She's right up here, just in case that wasn't clear. My wife met me Saturday night in Austin flying back from Lisbon. I think it was Taylor. I told Taylor that Jess was flying back from Lisbon. He was like, I don't even know where the hell Lisbon is. It's in Portugal, if you're curious. And this is she sent me some pictures. This is just one off Google, but it's really pretty. Amazing opportunity. She was in Europe for, they call it an offsite, but it's a team trip to just go out and party, basically. But she went for a team offsite to Lisbon. And I was also telling my friends at soccer the other night, I'm actually injured, so I can't play right now, but I still went to hang out with my team and support them. And I was like, yeah, Jess is in Lisbon, and it's casual, it's no big deal. And they were like, what? What does she do? What job? She's in Lisbon. Last year, at the end of the year, we were in London and Berlin and went to Paris in between. What the hell does she do where she travels to all these places? And I'll get to that in a second, but the crazy thing is, I want to tell you a little bit about her experience. Again, I apologize. I'm putting you in a spotlight that you don't want. But a little bit about her experience leading up to the job that she has now. Jess has worked in events and hospitality for years. That's what her mom has done for years. Actually, her mom is probably watching the live stream, so I ought to be careful what I say because I sent her a link to this. But they've been in this industry for years, and Jess has always, in every job she's ever done, been looked at and like verbally appreciated as someone who's really, really good at what she does. Has always naturally become the person on a given team for executing events or BOEs or like whatever it is that you do with that. Has always been looked at as a leader. People come to her with questions. She makes shit happen. She loves making shit happen and has always, in every job she's ever had, been told how good a job she is and how amazing she is, especially in comparison to the team around her. Every time. Now, I just realized her teammate Tyler Clark is in the audience, and he may be like, I don't know about that, but we'll talk later. But she's been in hospitality, which unfortunately in the positions that she's been in is nothing compared to tech. The money, the vacation, the culture has been nothing compared to tech. And so a little over a year ago, I'm looking at my watch, like the time is going to tell me how long it's been. A little over a year ago, Jess joined where I was working at the time for about a month, All-Zero. I ended up leaving a month or two later. It wasn't because she joined. We actually really enjoyed that part. It just happened to work out for me time for me to go somewhere else. She joined All-Zero. In the most proud way I can, Jess went overnight to tripling her salary, going from having limited vacation to unlimited vacation, from working with a team that wasn't so inspiring around her to working with people that got her excited about her job, working in a culture that pays attention to work-life balance, working in a culture that proactively reaches out to her to say, hey, maybe you're doing too much. Let's talk about this and make sure you're still happy, that you're not burnt out, that you're taken care of as a person. Overnight. Not to mention, she got to do employee stock purchase programs, so we got stock at a discount, and that's super cool. Not to mention, also, as I'm now doing content creation full-time, she has a good salary and health benefits, so that helps. But also not to mention that we're in a similar industry together where she does events and sponsorships, I speak at conferences and attend conferences, and we have made the most of this the last year. Not only has she been appreciated in so many different ways, we get to travel together. We've gotten to travel the world together, especially with a kid coming in May. There will be less opportunity, I hear, to travel with kids. Still doable. But the fact that you can change your career in every single category overnight is wild to me. The point I really want to get across is different companies will value you differently. She wasn't a different person. She didn't build a new set of skills that made her more in demand. She found the right company and changed everything overnight. Talk about this in my career. I was making $70,000 when I started at FedEx. I enjoyed a lot of my time there, although culturally things were just older. Started making $70,000 there, kind of ended at 90, I think, and then went to All-Zero, made 120 when I started, got a promotion and a few other things, made 150 on in my career. Over the course of almost doubled my salary in the span of a year and a half. Not a different person, no additional skill set. I was getting older, so I didn't look better, probably. But that's a big difference in money over the course of a very small time by just finding the company that can appreciate you in that way. So what does happiness look like? That's the first thing that comes to mind for me. Also, as any good millennial, we ask Twitter. And they've got lots of fun ones that you'll probably relate to. Not being scared to go in Monday morning. I think the first one is money up here, the paycheck. Yes, obviously, paycheck. And you'll see a lot of basically not dreading going into work. And one of the questions I meant to ask earlier is to give you the opportunity to take a second for yourself right now, as you think through these. When you think about Monday morning, right now, like hopefully you're having fun, and this is an amazing experience. You think about right now versus Monday morning, what are you thinking about Sunday night? Gotta get ready for Monday, thank you. Are you excited about that? Are you overwhelmed about that? Are you dreading that? Like, what are your feelings going into work? And at the end of the day, what are your feelings about leaving work? I want to talk about passion. This has been a debated topic, which I think is really interesting, and I understand different perspectives, so I'll kind of address this. But do you need passion to be successful in your career? The answer is no. Like, you don't have to be passionate about the things that you do for your career to be successful. But I think it's the wrong question, because who the hell wouldn't want to be passionate about the stuff that you're doing? You can substitute that for any word that you want, passionate, excited, blah, blah, blah. Who the hell wouldn't want to do something that they're passionate and excited about and get paid really well to do it? Now, there's the flip side of this where, like, companies advertise, we're looking for a passionate person, and that translates to we want a person that's going to work 60, 80 hours a week, right? That's not what I'm talking about. So, like, if that's the argument, yeah, that's not what we're looking for here. Work-life balance is my number one priority. But why would passion and excitement for the thing you do not be your number one goal from the start? So let's talk about money. Money is not my number one priority whatsoever. Work-life balance is actually my number one priority. But money's a priority. It's not number one, but it's up there. And going back to Justice Story and many others, and I've heard this, I've taught hundreds of people through boot camps, I've seen people go through transitions from working in fast food joints to working in tech and making tech money and doing every other job that you can imagine, going into tech and like transitioning from one industry that's drastically different than tech. I can guarantee you for everyone in this audience, whatever your job is, however much money you make, whatever the benefits are of your job, there's a job out there that does all of those things. It gives you the same excitement, it gives you the most enjoyment, you have the same vacation, you have the same benefits, but makes more money. I can guarantee you. My intention is not to say, like, everybody go find a new job and get all the money that you can, but at the same time, like, if you're gonna be happy in the same way, be excited about the people you're working on, work on the same tech stack that you're working on now that you enjoy, but make more money, why would you not do that? I almost guarantee you, for everyone in here, there is a job that meets all those check boxes, all those criteria for you, but makes more money. Again, not my number one priority, but I'm also a realist. As I said, work-life balance for me is number one, and I think about my worst fear is having to make decisions of whether or not I'm able to go to thinking about kids and future, thinking about not being able to go to a dance recital or a sporting event or a field trip, not being able to go to those things because I don't have the time off. That's one of my worst fears. And we've always said this, we've talked about this a lot, like I don't understand how two working parents do it with kids. Like you have to get kids to baseball at 3 o'clock, like you're gonna leave work at 2 o'clock every day to go pick up a kid and take them to baseball or like whatever it is. Like that's a very hard thing to do. So I'm also a realist of like, it's really, really tough. But my worst fear is having to constantly make decisions of whether or not I'm able to go and see the things or do the things with my kid. One of my worst fears. And I always thought this was so ridiculous, and I think it just goes back to being an older company. But at FedEx, no matter what level or title you join at, you get 2 weeks vacation. How could you possibly recruit talent at a senior staff principal level and offer them 2 weeks? There's no way in hell I would do that. No way in hell. How many people have like 3 weeks plus now vacation? A lot of hands. How many people have 4 weeks plus? Still a pretty good amount of hands. How many people have like unlimited? There's a lot of vacation out here in this room available, right? Think about if you had to switch jobs and go back to 2. Now you're having to start making more conscious decisions about which trips you can take with your family, which recitals you can go to, which sporting events you can go to, and you're having to make those decisions a lot more often. Work-life balance for me has always been my number one priority. This is another one I didn't time so well, but 2 weeks, I hear that like in the Chris Rock voice. Can you hear that? Like 2 weeks. Can y'all hear that? I don't think I'll do it justice, but like that's the way I hear that when I read it. Fun fact, we're going to see Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle in Memphis in like next week, which is super exciting. So let's talk about taking control in your career. I want to play a 1-minute clip. I'm a basketball person. I'm a sports person. I found this on TikTok, obviously, millennial. And it's a thing about Kobe Bryant. So I'm going to let this run for a minute, I think.
He's a ball hog. And then I read something where Kobe Bryant said, I came to practice with you. I saw what time you got there. I saw what time you left. I saw the type of energy you put in. I saw the commitment to the game. And so I'm going to take the last shot because I don't trust you. I'm like, oh, it makes sense now. I thought he was arrogant. Kobe said I was in practice with you. I saw you coming late. I saw you on your phone. I saw you wasn't committed. This is my life. This is how my family eats. This is my legacy. I'm not about to pass you the ball. I got here first. I left last. I'm going to put it on my own shoulder. I don't trust you to be able to. Respect is not given because how long you've been in the league. Respect is not given because of what your name is. Respect is earned, and it's earned daily.
The point of that is getting into the section of taking control. Where you go in your career, what you do with your career, the title that you have, the amount of money that you make. It's no one else's ability to control than yours. No matter what outside influences there are, it all comes down to you. No matter how good your boss is, no matter how good your team is, no matter how good your company is, the ownership of where you go and what you do in your career comes down to you. One of my favorite people in the Memphis community, one of the people that's gone through the journey of being a police officer to now a developer, done so many amazing things in the Memphis community with a group called codeconnector.io, is JC Smiley. I mean, just like really, really incredible. And he posted this article on dev.to, and the last thing he said was, never let your career be a coincidence. That's ownership. I've talked to Clark on the podcast the other day about me going full-time and how that's always been a goal of mine of doing content full-time for myself. And the question that I get to answer by doing that is, what am I capable of? Because at the end of the day, by myself and with a small team, I'm able to look back and say, I built everything I earned. Or I earned everything that I built, or like whichever way you want to phrase it. But I did that. Remember what scene, Coach Carter? Like the shoe tying scene, like I tied that shit? Yeah, anyway. So one of the things that I think is most important is communication. Communicating, asking for support to come to conference, having career conversations with your manager, getting feedback from peers and managers, etc. Go back to the communication, the power of storytelling with Becca's talk tomorrow, which you should absolutely check out. And I want to tell a little story of like communication is super important, but here's the impact that the appropriate communication can have. I told this story last night, I think, to a group, but a group, I wasn't actually even there for this, but at dinner, friends of mine in high school went to a nice steakhouse. Like, this is a big deal because we got high school money, which is no money, and they went to a steakhouse, getting a nice steak, go around the table, how do you want your steak cooked? Graham. Graham says raw, confidently. And the server's like, raw? And the rest of the table is like, Graham, what the hell are you talking about, raw? He's like, yeah. He starts to get annoyed. He's like, yeah, dude, leave me alone, like raw. So they go through and they bring out the plates. I lose my mind when I do this. They bring out the plates. They set it in front of him. It looks just like this. And he looks around the table and he's like, guys, I don't think they cooked this at all. Turns out he meant rare and was just mixing up the word, so they had to take it back and cook it, etc. But the point of that is, like, communication is good, but communicating the right thing is more important. And I think one of the aspects of that people don't do very well is changing the way you talk about yourself. One of those examples is don't say just. Don't say I just did this. Don't say I just know this language. Don't say I just built this thing. Change the way you talk about yourself to control the narrative. Because if you don't believe in yourself when you sell yourself to someone else, they're not going to believe you either. You have to control that. You have to find your why. My why, I've learned, is I love to teach. So if you ask me why you should hire me on your team, I'm going to say I'm a teacher by heart. I love doing that. So not only am I going to contribute with all the skills that I bring to the table, I'm going to make your team better because I am a teacher at heart. Am I hired? Find your why, learn how to control the narrative, and communicate what that why is. And my superpower, I've learned, is my voice. This is something I got thrown into with speaking. I didn't really have a choice. That was my job. I had to do it. So I've learned to communicate. I've learned to share, I've learned to do content, I've learned all these things, and I've learned about the idea of speaking things into existence. And that conversation that Clark mentioned earlier, us sitting down in Wisconsin, the one thing he missed is that I shared that I'm looking to do specifically keynote opportunities next year. That was partially how that conversation, at least the way I remember it. But that was something I specifically said of just communicating, just putting it out there into existence. And again, today, I get to be on stage as a keynote speaker from just putting it out there. So if you want to be X, Y, and Z and you're not telling people that, you're missing out on that opportunity. It doesn't mean it happens overnight. Again, it's a journey. It's all those things. But you can speak those things into existence. So one of the things I want you to do is stand up one more time. Somebody next to you, I just want you to share one goal or one thought that you have of something you would like to do. I'm going to time box this because I'm actually taking longer than I thought I would. 30 seconds, just share one thing that you would like to do better or that you could do better this year. Go. All right, I'm going to do like a 15-second check-in. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sincere, like I've legitimately, consistently been the person in the audience who gets annoyed when people on stage ask about interacting like this. I sincerely appreciate you doing that. And the one thing I want to highlight for you is that the communication that you just did, what you just did, takes a lot of courage. We talked about vulnerability, we talked about honesty. It takes courage to get up and do what you did, to share that. But now that's a thing that you can walk away from this/that conference, and you can think about for yourself of knowing, I said this to someone else, I know it means something to me, what am I doing about this later on? One of the things that becomes very important in your career is standing up for yourself. I've had to push myself to do this. I've been in my manager's office literally shaking like, I want more money. But I did it because I knew that was the right thing that I had to do to stand up for myself in that situation. A couple of fun facts about me. I'm actually like scared of water slides, though I really enjoy them. I'm scared specifically of roller coasters that go up straight and then just drop down, terrified. I would say I enjoy them. I'll never do that again. But I also enjoy towers. Like every city we've gone to, we go into a tower if there is one, which also terrifies me, the whole elevator ride up. But I do those things because I know I enjoy them, and for me, they were the right thing to do. So when you get scared to have that conversation with someone, when you get scared to be honest with yourself, when you get scared to say to your manager, I've got some feedback, or I want to change some things, or I want to build something, take the practical side of your mind and say, this is something I need to do. I might be terrible at it, but I'm going to do it because I know it's the right thing for me to do in my career. Force yourself to take those leaps. Oh, this is my scared face. I'm going to skip through or zoom through these, a couple of them quickly. Setting boundaries. Here's the thing that's most important for me. When it comes to boundaries, most people look at, hey, so-and-so continues to email me after 5. So-and-so continues to call me. So-and-so continues to email me instead of sending me a Slack message, or they set up a meeting so we could talk about it. That could have been an email. They talk about what other people are doing, but the reality is it's not other people's responsibility to respect your boundaries. Let's caveat that because we should all respect each other's boundaries. The reality is that they won't. It's your responsibility to enforce them, which means when you complain about someone sending you a message after 5 p.m., don't enable that by responding. On-call stuff, have to do it. I get it, separate situation. But if you get them in the habit of knowing you're going to respond after 5, they're going to message you after 5. Unless I really have nothing else going on, someone sends me a message after 5, hit you back tomorrow. It's your responsibility to enforce your boundaries. Network. It's an easy / really hard one. I think we get this mentality of this is a negative thing. It's not the cold open, like I'm James, I'm a blah, 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 and what can I do for you? It's not that. Like that's not what networking is. Networking is investing in your community, which is what you're exactly doing right now. Networking is just showing up. Networking is hanging out with your friends. There's nothing work-related in this picture, but there's a lot of happiness and there's a lot of relationships that go a long way in my future. I don't do that because I know it's going to have a benefit for me. I do it because I'm investing in my community and my friendships and my relationships and my network. Can I go up until the hour? That's what's scheduled, right? Okay. All right, so I'm going to tell you a story then. It wasn't always like this for me. You see me now walking around a conference. I know a lot of people. I'm proud of that. I've been doing this for a long time. I try to go and talk to people. I see people standing by themselves. I try to bring them in. If you're ever by yourself and you don't have someone, come just say hi. I will happily welcome you in, but I haven't always been that way. And I was telling this story last night as well. I went to a conference on a cruise. Well, hard to sell to employer, but it worked out. Went to a conference on a cruise, and I didn't know anybody. Joel, who, I don't know if Joel is still in here. Joel comes around the corner, like you've been paying attention this whole time. So Joel and I had dinner, like we were scheduled at the same dinner table. So we hung out like at nights at dinner, and we like hung out some during the day, and we're like better friends and stuff because we've seen each other 15 times since then. But I'm on Coder Cruise, and like I just don't know anybody, so I didn't know what to do. I didn't have the energy to go be my social self. I have that a lot of the time, but not all the time. So I spent a lot of time on this amazing cruise with other developers in my room. Fun fact about that room is I didn't upgrade to the one that had a window, so I just spent time in the dark by myself. I've been there at conferences. The first that conference that I went to, I didn't know almost anybody, and that was kind of rough mentally and socially for me. All of us that now talk about this openly with each other have all been there. But I now have a community of people, a network of community, of relationships, of friends, where I show up to a conference, I know I have people there that I can depend on. There's no better place to take advantage of that than where you are right now. If at any point during the rest of this conference you don't have anyone to talk to or sit to, even if it looks crowded at the table, come sit next to me. Communities that you can invest in. I talked about virtual coffee earlier. I referenced codeconnector.io with JC, who's one of my friends and leaders in the community in Memphis. I also run a Discord community in Learn, Build, Teach at learnbuildteach.com. And also, millennial, there's Twitter, which is debatable, but really good if you invest in it the right way. I don't know what that means. I got a cue from Jess. That could be good or bad, I think. Invest in yourself. Do that. Also, compare yourself. Most people give you the opposite advice of don't compare yourselves to others. But here's how this has changed for me in my career. When I was starting to take YouTube seriously and I wanted to really have growth, I looked at other creators that had been doing that for a much shorter amount of time than I had been creating videos, and I saw their visibility and subscribership skyrocket. CodeStacker, Floor and Pop, Anya Kubo, 3 of my fairly good friends online, people that I have a ton of respect for, amazing content creators and teachers and YouTubers, amazing, but I really struggled with that at the time. Because I would watch their growth skyrocket while mine did nothing. We've all been there. We look at how other people excel in situations. We look at how other people do things that we think, oh, they're just really good at that and we're not capable of it. We all have that reaction. We've all been there. We all have imposter syndrome. But what you can do is start to flip that on its head and start to look at, I haven't done that yet, but look at what's possible. These people that I have respect for, that are human beings just like myself, have now proven to me that that sort of growth on YouTube and this type of content is possible. And I kept at it. And in 2021, I earned my plaque. If you get on Zoom with me, I have my 100,000 subscriber plaque in the back of my camera because I'm damn proud of getting there. But I had to overcome and fight imposter syndrome and flip that comparison on its head to say, this is what is possible, and it's a thing that's possible that I never would have dreamed before. Had I not seen other people do it, I wouldn't have thought about it for myself. The one additional caveat to that is you have to do that with grace. You have to do that with empathy. You have to do that with understanding for yourself to understand that everyone's journey is different. You have to give yourself that grace, but look at what other people are doing as confirmation of the fact that it can be done. So actually we'll skip this, so I apologize. I want you to just think about this in your head. We talked about goals. I want you to think about one action. So in terms of taking control, what is something you have control over that you can take action on this year? And I want to end, well, the last section, I guess, is your brand. Your brand is the greatest asset you will ever own. Your brand is the one thing that you have full control over. Your brand is the one thing that you wholeheartedly own. It doesn't mean that I'm telling you you ought to be a full-time content creator. It doesn't mean I'm telling you you should be a speaker. It doesn't mean I'm telling you you should do any of the things that I'm doing. Just know that your brand is the one thing that you have complete control over, and it's the greatest asset you will ever own. I want to tell you a short story. I've got a few more minutes left. A short story about how I came to be a full-time content creator. And that was, I left my job at Aussiero, working with my wife, working with Tyler, went to a new company, really enjoyed everything. And in the summer, after being there for 8 months or so, got let go. Got a calendar invite on my calendar for 15 minutes, like a couple hours beforehand from the CEO. I sent him a message, hey, anything I should prepare for, because I'm a good employee, I'll be ready. And he didn't respond. I showed up and HR was there. And I sent Jess a text message right at that time. I said, oh shit. And CEO joined quickly and he said, regret to inform you this is your last day at Planet Scale. HR is basically going to take it from here. As he said, I regret to inform you, I got the notifications on my computer that I was signed out of Slack, that I was signed out of Google, that I was signed out of everything else. But I think how you respond to everything that happens in your life is a choice. And so I looked at that. I've had this idea of being a content creator for a while. I knew that was something I had thought about doing. I got let go on Thursday. My wife and I went out to an expensive dinner Thursday night to celebrate. Don't ask. Monday morning, I was a full-time content creator. I choke up every time I say that because it's the thing that I am most proud of in my career, is to be able to build something myself. And that became an opportunity for me based on all the work that I had been putting into my brand over the course of years. Your brand, Taylor will tell you this, your brand isn't valuable. You don't create your brand when you need it. You create your brand for when you need it. And at some point, your brand, your network will become important, and you will need it. Unfortunately, especially right now. So let's wrap up. The one last thought I want you to specifically focus on in this last couple of minutes is don't leave here wishing you had done more. I left Coder Cruise knowing I could have done more than be inside of my dark room with no window 40% of the time. I've left conferences, I've left events, I've left work meetings, knowing I could have done more. There's no better community than what you have now. There's no better network/investing in this community that you can take advantage of than at that conference. There's no better opportunity to do all the things that we're talking about than right now in the room that we sit in. So as I think back to my father, as I think about the opportunities that my wife and I have, and I think about a future family, future child, we'll see about family, or children. As you reflect on those things, as you reflect on what are people going to remember you by, how are people going to perceive you and what you did in your personal life for your family, for yourself, for your career, how they reflect on your happiness and the things that you did, what are they going to be thinking? Unfortunately, as I look back at my dad's, not career, but series of jobs, it's not the path that I want to take. I use as an opportunity to look at how I could do things differently. But when you think about generations of how they're going to have perceived what you did in your personal life, what will they be thinking? My name is James Q. Quick. I run a YouTube channel. I run a Discord community. I run a podcast. I'm active on Twitter. I do a lot of things, but most importantly, I create content because I love to teach, and I create content in this specific case because I want to inspire. Thank you.
We're gonna go a little over. A year ago, the last 3 years have been extremely difficult for me, which I'm not going to get into all those details. But a year ago, I needed help, and I joined an organization called Entrepreneurs Organization. It's for entrepreneurs. Obviously, it's in the title. And one of the rules, the founding tenets, is we're not allowed to give advice. We're allowed to listen, and we can share our experiences. But absolutely no problem solving. And if you try to, anybody who wears the membership badge gets to call you on it. Okay? So it's a hard no. Do not solve somebody else's problems. Just share your advice and let them take it all in and form their path. Okay? Since James got into making decisions, I'm going to share a little story that doubles back on his current journey. And for those, there's college kids starting out. And for some of you, you may be in this place. I told you I was a husband, 2 kids, a wife, a dog, and I work too much, own 2 companies. My family work-life balance isn't great. The year was 2005, and much like James, my wife and I were trying to have a kid, except it was difficult. I learned about science. I thought if you just did the thing, like, poof, you have a baby. Turns out not so much. So we spent the next year and a half trying to have a baby, and anybody who's been in that unfortunate position knows it then becomes work and scheduled and regimented, which you didn't expect. So in this time, I decided that it was time for me to leave the job that I was in. I worked for the CTO, who I've since reconnected with, even late this day, one of the greatest people that I've worked for. And I joined this little tech company called Microsoft. Thought it was a big deal. Dream job. Working for the big guys. And I started in maybe a late June. And since I live in the most awesome state of Illinois, I had to fly out to Seattle to get my badge and do all the kind of employee orientation and whatever big corporate shit you do. And I work hard. So it was also the time where we found out that Carrie might be pregnant. And so she had her first ultrasound during that time. But we had been having troubles, so didn't necessarily have the highest of expectations. And when you're in a, I don't want to say high risk, but when you're in that scenario of life, you know, everything's a little hypersensitive. So they're like, come in, we're going to do an ultrasound, but I don't want you to expect anything. This is just like, we're just going to see what's kind of going on. I got a big job now. Like, I'm making real money, like 100. Like, holy cow. I can't screw this up, so I got to go. And we were cool. You go on the plane, you go do the first job thing, or the big job thing. I'll get to ultrasound, I'll take my mom. It's fine. Nothing's really going to happen. Fast forward a few days, I'm up there, I'm in Seattle. For whatever reason, it was super hot, and they don't have air conditioning, so that was miserable. And I get a text, and I'm with a bunch of people, and I get a text, and I look down at the phone, although it was much larger and some Windows crap, and it said, there's no heartbeat. And I stood there, devastated. And I didn't know what to say. Here, my wife, my best friend, is 2,000 miles away, and there's no heartbeat. And who's there? Her mother. And I'm not downplaying that. I'm glad she was with family, but it wasn't me, and it wasn't my journey, our journey, for the last year. And as I stood there, trying to keep it together, much like I am now, I'm with a few new coworkers. And at this point, the getting involved, meeting people, Clark, went from the high to the lowest of lows. And obviously people saw it. Is that me making noise, Aaron? Better? It's like I just grew like 10 feet of facial hair. So what happens when you turn 40, Mr. Millennial? Suddenly, like, a hair just like shoots right out of your eye, falls down on your knee, and then there's this pocket of like, what the hell? So there's no heartbeat. So I'm like, well, I can't be home for a couple more days because the flight's on Saturday. The guy who was standing next to me goes, and I apologize for the language, goes, you fucked up. Bad. What are you doing here? And I said, my job. I thought this is where I was supposed to be. And he goes, absolutely not. Let me tell you something. There are things you can do one time and one time only. And there are things you can do one time, anytime. And you fucked up. You will never be able to have the first ultrasound of your first child with your wife. This job is not that important. You missed it. It was important before there was no heartbeat. It's even more important now that there is no heartbeat. And my boss at the time, who was mind-bogglingly good, goes to me and says, why are you here? Why did you not tell me? I would have made the trip next week. But I was scared. Who am I to tell the boss that this family thing is going on? Now remember, this is 2006. I'm aging myself. So I'm just stunned, and I don't know what to do. And my boss turns around, and he has a flight for me, the next flight, and says, go home. Go home, be with your family. I'll talk to you next week. Didn't say go to work, he said go home and deal with it. Bill was an amazing individual. Later on that night, the doctors call again. They say, just come back next week. Don't freak out. It's early. We're like, sure. So we come back next week. I'm at home. There's a heartbeat. And 9 months later, Ethan was born. And it was amazing. But I never forget about that time. One time only, one time, anytime. Fast forward, he was 3, so 3 years. And now I'm working on a healthcare project. Big deal. We're going to save lives. Class 2 medical device. All the things. And I love my kids. You're scared shitless, and you should be. Okay? It done changes everything. But let me tell you, I'm a better man because of it. I'm a better human. I'm a better boss. I'm a better worker. All because of my kids. So my son is 3 at this point. And we are working 120-hour weeks, 130-hour weeks because of the timeline. Literally 72-hour shifts, sleeping in cots. And when people say this shit doesn't happen, it happens. 7 months, I think it was 8 months, I had billed 2,100 hours. For reference, there's 2,200 hours in a year you're supposed to bill, okay? A lot of Red Bull in that body back then. My son comes up like the 7th month, 3-year-old, innocent, blonde hair, daddy's boy, and goes, "Why don't you love me anymore?" And I was like, oh, shit, here we go, all over again. I had chose other things. And I didn't see it because I was working hard because wife's pregnant again. We need food on the table and mortgages, all the things. But I made a lot of the wrong decisions. And I share that story because we're here and we're learning about tech and exposure and all that. But the things that happen, all the other stuff, hearing the story, hearing that's the life-changing stuff that alters your career, that makes real impact in this industry, that when bosses hear it and leads hear it and all this, together we grow better because you're a much more productive person when you're working 40 or less than you are when you're working 120. And it's easy to get into the thing and just kind of lose your sense of everything. So, lean in, meet people, and share the story to give you some experience shares, we call it. Also, Jordan, Kobe, damn millennials. So just think about that. That's my experience share. I don't get to speak out there, but it was a piece of life-changing advice for me that I use every single day of my life. Okay, a few things today I just want to remind you of. 5 o'clock, where are my members at? We started a membership program. Stand up, please. I started a membership program because, well, let's give them a round of applause. I don't want them to stand. I can't see who's back there. Just the applause, you can sit. The applause in this case is I'm just grateful, again, that you would take a little bit of money and support us in a different way. The membership program is because you're not the product for me. We want to build features. We want to connect you. We don't want to do what everybody else, that's a bad statement, what others are doing. So thank you. 5 o'clock, meet me at the barn. We're going to talk about some of how the sausage is made. And if you're interested in becoming a member, talk to me, please do. I'd love it. 5:30, barbecue. I don't know if you can tell, I've gained a little weight over the pandemic. I really think, Taylor was saying this yesterday, breaking bread, I really think a lot of things happen when we sit around a table and we have a meal. I love barbecue. If you know anything about me, you know I kind of obsess about it a little too much. It's coffee and barbecue. We're going to have barbecue. The barn is, you're going to go down to the second story, second level of the convention center, which, mind you, that's where we'll be next year. And then you're going to walk out. There's a little trail that goes out to the big brown bar. And then later on that night, as I mentioned yesterday, we're not going to have the water park party, but you just follow the little sidewalk, and there's some fire pits and a bar. And if it's anything like what we had outside yesterday, it was absolutely amazing. I've got a bunch of swag that we drag down here. Shirts are $5, hoodies, whatnot. It's a great way to support us in what we're doing. It's also a great way to help me save on shipping costs and fuel costs on the way home, okay? So, out there. Lastly, let's give a huge round of applause for our sponsors. And I say that because they've leaned in. We have a gentleman right there who I met last year, works at Robert Half. We've had conversations throughout the year. Anybody who knows me, Jess and I dragged her on stage for a podcast yesterday. Oh yes, by the way, we're starting a podcast called That Podcast. Super creative. Thank you, I trademarked it. Talk to them, learn what they're doing. Thank you to the sponsors for leaning in and just getting involved and going to the things. That's where special happens. Lastly, I'll just put that up if you want to be there. Thank you. Let's have an excellent second day. I love the energy. I love you all. Let's give James another round of applause for an amazing keynote. You have a little bit of time, James and Jess. There's a private room over there that you can solve your marital differences. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day. Now put that back up, John.